Here we go. And now it's on.
We're the 9:45.
Okay, Bill, come on.
So
Let's make
they
it
would
short.
take that fuel in order to fuel air heat exchange for flex line.
Okay.
About 3 feet long. There's a missing tank. Metal fitting.
I use my speaking voice. Can you hear me? Yes. Go in the back. All right.
A little bit.
All right. First off, I just want to thank you all for inviting me, Joe, and referred from George to invite me here tonight. And I'm just really having a good time in this meeting. I just want to say that I am really impressed with the group here. The history and the camaraderie and the continuity that you have with each other is just impressive, and it's overwhelming. You guys, I'm jealous. So keep it up, keep it up. This is wonderful. Yeah, just all right. I feel like I've encountered a whole new circle of good friends, and it's really fun to be here, and I will try to make another one if I can in the future. I'm invited, of course. So, a little bit of background. I went to Navy Flight School, finished in 1965. Took my Christmas leave, went home, took my H-46 handbook with me, NATOPS, and studied it on Christmas Eve because I knew when I came back I'd be flying a 46, the latest, coolest thing, right?
Right.
I was so disappointed when I got back to New River and they put me in 34s. But then years later I learned about all the problems with the 46, and I was glad to fly the 34. And I was in 365, and we had a bunch of bachelors there. And one day about half of us got orders to go over to 162. And this is spring maybe of 66. And the reason for the transfer is because a bunch of married guys were transferred over from 162 to 365 to balance out the squadron so everybody would have close to the same number of married men so they could have a bowling league. That's how I ended up in 162 for about 4 months. I knew Leon Moore, Chris Salmon, everybody knew him. And I really don't remember anybody else, but I like Leon. He was one of my instructors, gave me pre-Vietnam training. Oh, first off, I got some sad news here for us all. Sad news for some of us, maybe happy news for the rest of us. Does everybody know that, well, I have to refer this with, I might use the occasional 4-letter word, and I apologize up front. But I'm sure all the wives have probably heard 4-letter words. So the bad news is, the bad good news is that Stormy Daniels has died. Anybody remember who she is?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. She was a beautiful woman, and whether you liked her politics or her thing with Trump or not, it's too sad that she's died. But also today, Queen Elizabeth died.
Oh, my goodness.
Both of them today.
Goodness.
About the same time.
Oh my goodness.
And so they both got to heaven
Oh,
at the same time.
it's a joke.
And they go up to the pearly gates to see St. Peter. And St. Peter is very apologetic. He's got his clipboard under his arm. He looks at the two ladies and he says, "Ladies, I've got a problem. Heaven's full except for one position. So I can only take one of you this time. So you each have to present to me why you should go to heaven and the other one shouldn't." So Stormy Daniels doesn't hesitate. She whips off her top and she shows off this magnificent pair, 4-letter word, pair of boobs, 4-letter word, multiple, plural. And she squeezes them together and pushes them up and pushes them down and jumps around and shows off this beautiful pair. I mean, God, St. Peter's been in heaven at the door for 8,000 years and he's getting aroused. This is amazing. So she does this, she just puts on a great show for St. Peter. Then, it's Queen Elizabeth's turn. Well, as it is in heaven, a toilet magically appears and she just walks over and flushes the toilet. And St. Peter says, "Queen, you may enter heaven." Well, Stormy Daniels is incensed. How can this possibly be? I mean, I have the greatest pair in town in the history of mankind. How can you possibly not accept this pair? Four-letter word. And so St. Peter says, well, Miss Daniels, I'm sorry to inform you that a royal flush beats up here, any size, always.
Very good. What did he say?
It was bad.
All right, I got a few notes here. I can just barely read them. So, like you guys, I spent my time in Vietnam. I don't know if I need to talk about all that. We've all done there and been there and done that. And we each have our individual stories. And I highly encourage everybody to write your story down for your grandkids. It doesn't have to be neat, it doesn't have to be polished, it doesn't have to be correct punctually or grammar or wording or spelling. Just write it down. It's amazing. I wrote my book about my experience in Vietnam, and it was very good for me because I had a tremendous case of post-traumatic stress when I came back from Vietnam. Writing the book, it's like, of course, most of you probably never did this. You never got so drunk you threw up, right? Well, I did a time or two, and I know how that feels. And I know how it felt when I took that first book out of the box, I put it on my counter, and I went, oh. All of that poison thoughts and junk and stuff that was inside me is now in that book. And it's not a hard book to read. It's not evil. It's not full of nasty stuff, just a little bit. So anyway, I did write that one book about the adventures of flying helicopters in Vietnam. But after Vietnam, I came back to the States. I rotated out of Vietnam in August of '67. Went back to Tustin. Great little base after being deprived of everything until I got there. I kind of went crazy and had a wild time, but I had a lot of fun. And I got out in '68, late '68. And at that time, the airlines were furloughing. I'm sure you've all seen or remember that time. The airlines were not hiring. And I knew Ansley Horton. Somebody mentioned Ansley Horton here earlier. He was a good friend of mine, and we flew in Alameda for the reserves together at HMM 769. And he had been hired and subsequently laid off by 3 major airlines before many years later, he collected with Delta, I understand. But it was hard. It was a hard time, and I couldn't get a job. I wanted to fly. But one day I got a telegram from the CIA, Air America. So I said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go back to the war. The war sucks. But I got brokered, and I was corresponding with a good friend of mine who went, to make a short story, 6 months before me. We were corresponding, and he was telling me, what a good deal this is, Bill. Come on over. So he finally convinced me to go over to Air America and live in Udor, Thailand, and fly in Laos. And it was the grandest adventure any young helicopter pilot could ever hope to have. And my last letter to him was, I said, Dear Gary, inbound, Bill. His response was, Bill, ETA, Gary. That was our entire correspondence. So I went over there, and my God, it was wonderful. It really was. So yeah, it was a little dangerous at the time. It got dicey a few times. I got laced full of holes one time, shot at a few other times. But overall, it was a whole lot better job than flying in Vietnam for the Marine Corps.
A lot better pay.
Pardon me?
A lot better pay.
I'll get to that, yes. Yeah, we figured it was a 50 times better job because it was about 1/10 of the risk and 5 times the pay. Do the math.
Yeah.
Yeah, 50 times, almost. I found a website online where you can adjust for inflation, and adjusting the $40,000 I was making in 1972 to today's money is almost $250,000 today. So yeah, we were having fun. We were bachelors.
You get a chance
A lot of
looking.
money. And guess what else we got?
I was thinking about it.
Yeah, I was thinking about
We got
it.
R&R every
Tax-free
month. We got a week off every month.
Wow.
And we had airline benefits. So my good friend Gary and I were both bachelors. We've got all this money. we just decided we're going to take advantage of this because we don't know if it's going to last, how long it's going to last. So every month we plan, and we used Pan Am a lot because Pan Am was convenient for us, and we like Pan Am. And we had, I think, 75% discount on Pan Am. So we could go to the States and back for 100, 150 bucks. Around the world for, I think, 100. It was incredible. So we did. When we had while I was there 2 years, we had leave. I had 30 days leave, in addition to my R&R every month. So my friend and I put our R&R each month on the ends of our leave, so we had 6 weeks off, 6.5 weeks off, with pay and airline benefits. We planned 2 trips all the way around the world. We just wrote in every Pan Am stop and just stopped. Usually we stopped because whatever leg we were on, we'd go in the back and hustle the Stewies, and they can call them stewardesses, okay? And by the time we got wherever we're going, we had dates. And they knew the area where we're going, so they'd show us around. So we had a great time. My God, it was wonderful. And I've written a second book about that called The CIA Super Pilot Spills the Beans. The reason I named that book is kind of an amusing joke, inside joke in a way. Well, we were at Udon, Thailand, in the summer, early part of 1972. A war correspondent named Ann Darling came to our base. She went to the bars and hung out with the guys and picked their brains. Well, they knew she was going to write a story, and they had her full of beans. But she did write an article, and it's about 5 or 6 pages, in an offshoot of Playboy magazine called We, O-U-I. And the very premier #1 issue of We magazine came out with the article, CIA Super Pilots Spill the Beans. So how could I not take off on that for the title of my book about my experience with Air America? And I put a disclaimer right up front that I don't expose any government secrets. I don't expose any CIA secrets, just a memoir of my experience while I was there. So we had about 6 bases all over Laos, and the biggest one was up in central Laos at the secret CIA base called Long Chen. It was one of the busiest airports in the world, and the world didn't know it was there. We had hundreds of operations every day. Many of them were helicopters, but there was the North Vietnamese Army was pushing south, trying to take over all of Laos, and in support of their Ho Chi Minh Trail. And they wanted to take over all of Laos anyway. And they also wanted to keep we Americans and the Laos from interfering with the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So it was a little battle there between the Laos and the North Vietnamese. And the Laos weren't like the South Vietnamese. They hated communism. They didn't plant spies or give information away about us, about their own people. They wanted independence. They didn't want to be slaves to the North Vietnamese. So when the Ho Chi Minh Trail thing happened, 300,000 indigenous native hill tribes people were given a choice by fate. They could stay near the trail and they could be enslaved or killed by the North Vietnamese, or they could move west and escape and move to the hilltops around this place called Long Chen. And our government took it upon itself to support these 300,000 people. And that's a lot of what I did. I hauled, for a week at a time, I'd haul nothing but 200 kilo bags of rice to the various villages all around the place. Yeah, or chickens, or pigs, or whatever. We even had a Catholic priest out there who hitched a ride with us once in a while. And pigs. And it just goes on and on. But we also did some military support for their army, because we recruited all of their men between the ages of 16 and 60, helped them create an army and put them up on a ridge to protect southern Laos. And the ridge just north of the secret CIA base at Long Chen was called Skyline Ridge. And we had about 6 outposts on this ridge, just like your typical Marine Corps outpost on a hilltop in Vietnam. Just exactly the same thing with a helipad at each one. So we went to a different base and we rotated every time. So I'd spend some time in Long Chen, some time in Pak Se, sometime in Savannah Ket, sometimes in Bon Hui Sai, and sometimes we fly out of Vientiane, the capital of Laos. So it was really interesting, really challenging, very differing work every time. Each place had its own different challenges. And once in a while we got shot at, not too often. Nothing like Vietnam, even though I don't remember getting shot at that much in Vietnam. I was there not too long after you guys. So anyway, it was a tremendous experience. Made a lot of money, had a lot of fun. And most of the, when they started hiring pilots, I hired a lot of my contemporaries from Vietnam. They had a big hiring surge about 69 and 70. And so 30 or 40 of my friends are here too, guys I knew like you guys. We bonded in Vietnam, and then we got to fly again at Santa Ana after Vietnam for a few months or a year and a half for me, and then again at Air America. So we knew our friends, we knew who we could trust, we knew who would come down for us on a bench, and we had this great little subunit out there, you might say. And the history of Air America is that it started off as a Marine Corps squadron anyway. I think President Kennedy saw the Laos needed some help, so he sent in a Marine Corps squadron. And that evolved into Air America. I won't get into the details on that. But good, challenging flying. Later, I got to fly Hueys, the 204, not Hueys, actually, but 204s and 205s, which are, this ladies may not know, that's the civilian version of the Huey. And good machine, I got about 1,000 hours in that. And then I decided it was time to go home. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them. I can go on for a bit more if you all want to, or I can sit down. Any questions? Oh yes, and I also have both my books here for sale. And they're $20 for the Marine Corps book, $25 for the Air America book, $40 for the pair. Sir?
When you flew for Air America, did you have a co-pilot?
With Air America, we flew the H-34 single pilot most of the time.
With a crew chief?
We had a crew chief down below, but nobody in the left seat. In fact, it was really handy because I had my thermos and my lunch and my snacks. I turned the co-pilot seat upside down, make it a box, and then just put stuff in there. And the places we were working there was not a lot of traffic, and we knew who was there and what they were doing. And we had to make a position report every 15 minutes. So every time you made a position where it was plotted on the board. So if you suddenly dropped out of sight, they knew where to start to search for you. But in making these position reports, we knew where all the other guys were. And we could talk to each other on the radio. So it was really quite safe, I thought. But if we had something that was dicey, we'd have what they call a special mission. It was like putting an insert or an extract. We did those regularly. In that case, we always flew 2 pilots. So the company would send out another pilot to fly co-pilot for somebody, and we'd always have 2 aircraft, just like the Marine Corps. We always had a backup aircraft in case somebody went down. So